Welcome back to a new episode of the 1982 Kawasaki 750 Limited rebuild. A little bit further on in this episode I'll show you some preparations I made for doing this tank and why I did it the way it is now. But before I show you that, I thought I'd explain to you something that I bumped up against after reinstalling the tank back on the motorcycle. Now, when starting the motorcycle, it was idling very rough. It wasn't running smooth at all. And the right side of the engine, of the cylinder, was hot. And the left side of the engine, where cylinder number 1 is, it was running cold. And it was very evident at that moment that cylinder 1 isn't firing for some reason. And if you search the web, it could be a lot of reasons why one of the cylinders doesn't fire. It could be a compression issue. It could be that one of your carbs is clogged and it's not getting any gas. It could be a spark plug, it could be something in your wiring or in your coils. So there was a lot to think about what the cause was of this problem. So what I did first, it was the easiest solution I could think of to at least find the problem. And I don't have any equipment to measure the compression in the cylinders. So what I did was I started the engine and I would have it idling. And while it was idling, I would take off a spark plug cap one by one. And when you do that, you see that the RPMs go down. And so I did this with cylinder number 4. I took off the spark plug cap and the RPMs went down. I put it back on and the RPMs went back up again. I did this for cylinder 4, 3, 2 and eventually for cylinder 1. 4, 3 and 2. Every time I took off the spark plug cap, the RPMs would go down. So that's telling me that those cylinders are working. Cylinder number 1, on the other hand, when I took off the spark plug cap, nothing happened with the RPMs. So I was sure at that moment that cylinder number 1 was giving me a problem. Now I do have a tool to visually look at the spark that's being given to the spark plug, and coming from the coils through the wiring and the cap, every cylinder was getting a spark, so that wasn't an issue. So what I did was I exchanged spark plug number 1 with spark plug number 4, and what turned out? Cylinder number 4 stayed cold, cylinder number 1 started to get warm. So I knew it was a spark plug issue. So I just bought 4 new spark plugs. Here they are, $18. I'm going to put them in now, start the engine again, and see if we've solved the problem. I'll get back to you. Right, well, I exchanged the 4 spark plugs. So let's start her up, see how she idles, and see if you can hear the sound better. 4 cylinders working instead of 3. So let's see what happens. Well, as you could probably hear, it needs some more adjustment, but the engine sounds fantastic. All cylinders are working fine, and the exhaust sounds fantastic. I'm very satisfied. So I'm going to do some more tuning on the engine, and of course I've got a number of things still to do to finish this bike, but I hope this was helpful. It's not, you know, technologically very advanced, it's not complicated, but it is something that you can just bump up against when you're working on your bike. So I hope that maybe if you bump up against this problem that you now know how to solve it. Well, I'll show you a little bit more about the tank now, and look forward to a next video. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to a new episode of the 1982 Kawasaki 750 Limited Rebuild. As you can see here, I finished the rear seat pad, fastened it onto the bike, and I think it looks quite sharp. It's not exactly the same color as the seat in front of it, which has to be redone anyway, eventually, but it looks much cleaner, I think. So this turned out quite nice. What I'm going to do now is the tank. I've already done the underside of the tank. I'll show you that in a minute. And I have a whole new idea how I'm going to do this tank. I'm not going to use a wrap. I'm actually going to sand everything down and make sure it's all neat. Then I'm going to put on 2 or 3 coats of primer, after which I'm going to put on 2 or 3 coats of this flat white military used paint. I'll give it about 2 or 3 coats of that, and once that's dried I'm going to paint on top of the tank a sort of a distressed vintage Japanese flag. That's going to look very neat. And after that's all finished, I'm going to put on 2 or 3 coats of clear gloss to make sure everything looks nice. So let's get started. I'll show you the underside of the tank so you know what that looks like. It looked terrible previously, before I sanded and painted it again. The underside is painted black, so let's get started. Well, to first give you an idea how the underside of the tank turned out, it's painted gloss black. I did a lot of sanding first and cleaning, and I think it turned out quite nice. So the underside of the tank is completely finished. And what I also did while working on the tank is completely clean out and refurbish the petcock. It was leaking gas, and that's not leaking gas anymore. So let me get on with sanding and preparing the tank. Well, after filling in and sanding the last imperfections in the tank, I gave it 3 coats of primer, as you can see here. It's more or less dry at the moment, but even so there are just a few slight imperfections that I want to take out also. So I'm going to buy a can of liquid filler tomorrow and coat the tank in a liquid filler just to take out the last imperfections. And once that's dry, I'll go and give it 2 or 3 coats of the flat white military white that I showed you earlier, and take it from there. So I'll be back. Well, here's the next step in the tank. It's an off-white military paint, and you guys are probably wondering, where is this leading to? I'll be showing you that shortly, after we finish the Japanese flag and finish painting this 1 or 2 times again, and eventually painting it with 3 or 4 coats of gloss enamel. We'll be back. Well, I guess if you're a purist, you're probably going to hate me now for what I did with the tank. I weathered the tank, as you can see here. I put in the red spot of the Japanese flag, and I weathered the tank, as you can see here. Added a few Japanese symbols. The bottom one has to be defined a little bit better, so I'm going to do that tomorrow when the paint is dry. Here's the top one. So I tried to weather that as best as possible, as you can see here. Now I just have to touch up a few things tomorrow when the paint has dried, and then after it's fully dried I'm going to put on a clear lacquer and that's going to be about 4 or 5 coats. I might have to sand this down a little bit just to make sure that it all is smooth enough for the lacquer to cover, and then we'll take it from there.